Emmylou Harris was born on April 2, 1947, in Birmingham, into a family where discipline and dedication were part of everyday life. Her father, Walter Rutland Harris, was a military pilot who served in World War II and later fought in the Korean War. During the Korean War, he was captured and held as a prisoner of war for 16 months, and for a time was listed as missing in action. His eventual return left a profound impression on young Emmylou, who grew up seeing her father as a hero and carried a deep desire to make him proud. That desire became a powerful motivation in her life. Emmylou excelled academically, earning top grades, while also participating in extracurricular activities. She was a cheerleader and played saxophone in her school's marching band. As a teenager, she even won the local Miss Woodbridge beauty pageant. In 1965, she graduated as valedictorian from Garfield High School and enrolled at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro with the intention of becoming an actress. Although she would later build a remarkable career in music, at that time she did not feel a strong passion for it. Piano lessons failed to inspire her, and playing the saxophone often felt more like an obligation than a joy. Emmylou Harris's first great passion was theater, and she devoted herself to acting in school plays. However, in the early 1960s, the folk revival changed her direction. Influenced by artists such as Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, and Buffy Sainte-Marie, she picked up a guitar given to her by her grandfather and began teaching herself how to play. Although her studies at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro were academically demanding, music gradually became her outlet. She formed a folk duo called Emerald City with fellow student Mike Williams, performing in small coffeehouses. Later, she began singing solo under the stage name The Corner. By 1967, she decided to leave university to pursue music full-time and moved to Greenwich Village in New York City, then the center of the folk scene. During this period, she supported herself by working as a waitress while performing in clubs and cafes, gradually establishing a presence in the local music community. She met songwriter Tom Slocum, married him in 1969, and they had a daughter. Despite these changes in her personal life, she remained committed to music, building connections within New York's folk circle and eventually signing a contract with Jubilee Records. In 1970, her debut album Gliding Bird was released, featuring several of her own compositions as well as a song written by Slocum. Shortly afterward, however, Jubilee Records went bankrupt, leaving the album without promotion and causing it to fade into obscurity. After this setback, the couple moved to Nashville in hopes of rebuilding their careers. The strain of these difficulties eventually affected their marriage and led to divorce. She returned to her parents' farm near Washington, D.C. with her daughter. At that time, she considered giving up music, believing that her brief time in the industry had come to an end, though events would later prove otherwise. With few job opportunities in the Washington, D.C. area and no clear backup plan, Emmylou Harris returned to what she knew best, singing. She began performing again in local bars and clubs, rebuilding her confidence one show at a time. Then, during one seemingly ordinary performance, an unexpected turning point arrived. Members of the Flying Burrito Brothers, relaxing after their own show, happened to see her perform and were struck by her voice and stage presence. Word quickly reached Graham Parsons, the band's former frontman, who was searching for a female vocalist to provide harmonies on his upcoming solo project. Curious after hearing the recommendation, Parsons attended one of Harris's performances. He was immediately impressed by her vocal range and emotional depth. Soon after, he invited her to Los Angeles to collaborate on his solo album GP, released in 1972. Although the record did not achieve major commercial success, it marked the beginning of a powerful artistic and personal partnership. More importantly, Parsons became a mentor figure, introducing Harris to the core of country rock and helping her shape her own musical identity. Harris toured with Parsons and his backing band, the Fallen Angels, and in 1973 returned to the studio with him to record what would become his second and final album, Grievous Angel. Tragedy struck in September 1973 when Parsons died of a drug and alcohol overdose in a California motel room. His sudden death deeply devastated Harris, but instead of withdrawing, she chose to continue the path they had begun together. Determined to carry forward that musical vision, she formed her own group, Angel Band, and resumed performing. Around this time, Mary Martin, Parsons's former representative at Warner Brothers Records, took an active role in launching Harris's solo career. Martin introduced her to Canadian producer Brian Aherne, who had recently gained recognition for his work with Anne Murray. Recognizing Harris's potential, Aherne collaborated with her on Pieces of the Sky, her second solo album for Warner Brothers, released in 1975. This time the outcome was very different. The album reached number 7 on the Billboard Country Chart and climbed to number 45 on the Billboard 200, establishing Harris as a major new voice in country music. One song in particular stood out, Boulder to Birmingham. Co-written by Harris, it served as a tribute to Parsons and remains one of her most personal compositions. Blending sorrow, longing, and spiritual reflection, the song features the poignant line, "I would rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham," echoing both gospel imagery and deep emotional loss. Later that same year, Harris released Elite Hotel, further solidifying her place at the forefront of the country scene. It became her first number 1 album on the Billboard Country Chart and reached the top 25 on the Billboard 200, confirming her emergence as a leading force in American country music. Emmylou Harris scored major hits with her versions of Together Again and Sweet Dreams, proving her ability to reinterpret country classics in her own distinctive style. Together Again, originally by Buck Owens, became softer and more intimate in her hands, highlighted by steel guitar and a restrained, tender vocal that helped bring her wider radio recognition. Sweet Dreams, written by Don Gibson and famously recorded by Patsy Cline and Roy Orbison, was an even greater challenge. Harris delivered it with clarity and emotional restraint rather than dramatic sorrow. The performance earned her a Grammy Award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance, and strengthened her reputation as one of country music's leading voices. In the late 1970s, she released a series of successful albums including Luxury Liner, 1977, Quarter Moon in a 10-Cent Town, 1978, Profile, The Best of Emmylou Harris, 1979, and Blue Kentucky Girl, 1979, the last of which brought her another Grammy. By then, she had become a defining artist of her generation. In 1977, she married producer Brian Aherne. Together, they resisted efforts from Warner Brothers Records to push her toward a more commercial pop sound. After releasing Light of the Stable, 1979, Roses in the Snow, 1980, and Evangeline, 1981, however, her momentum began to slow. Later albums such as Cimarron and White Shoes achieved moderate sales but received more muted responses from critics and fans. In the early 1980s, rumors suggested that Emmylou Harris had lost the creative spark that defined her 1970s success. Under growing pressure and facing creative struggles, she blamed her producer and husband Brian Aherne. Their marriage ended in divorce in 1983, and she returned to Nashville determined to begin again. In 1985, she collaborated with British singer-songwriter Paul Kennerley on the Ballad of Sally Rose, a semi-autobiographical concept album. Though not a major commercial hit, it was praised by critics. The same year they married. She followed with 13, 1986, and Angel Band, 1987. Her biggest commercial success of the decade came with Trio, 1987, recorded with Dolly Parton and Linda Ronstadt. It became her best-selling album and featured To Know Him Is to Love Him, Telling Me Lies, and Those Memories of You. By the early 1990s, she parted ways with Warner Brothers Records and divorced Kennerley. In the mid-1990s, seeking reinvention, she worked with producer Daniel Lanois on Wrecking Ball, 1996, an experimental album featuring songs by Neil Young, Jimi Hendrix, and Steve Earle. Wrecking Ball marked a bold departure in the career of Emmylou Harris. The title track, in particular, captured her artistic rebirth. With echoing guitars, haunting reverb, and an almost whispered vocal delivery, she created a soundscape that felt intimate and spiritual. It was no longer purely country, but something blending alternative rock and ethereal Americana. The album proved to be a triumph. It earned Harris a Grammy Award for Best Contemporary Folk Album and introduced her to a new generation of listeners. More importantly, it reaffirmed her reputation as an artist unafraid to evolve and willing to take creative risks with grace. Although the commercial spotlight faded somewhat in the years that followed, Harris never stopped creating. She continued recording, collaborating with younger musicians, and performing at benefit concerts and festivals. Her voice, weathered yet rich, remained strikingly clear and expressive. Even later in life, she has remained active, relevant, and artistically fearless. But Emmylou Harris is more than a singer. She is a cultural icon, a bridge between generations and musical traditions. Her voice, both fragile and strong, has comforted and challenged audiences for decades. She brought country music to folk and rock listeners, proving that a woman's voice in American music can be not only beautiful, but wise, resilient, and transformative. Decades after her debut, she continues to inspire emerging artists and captivate longtime fans. For many, Emmylou Harris remains the sound of authenticity, the sound of America's soulful melody.